All right, guys, so today we're going to jump into Cinema 4D and just kind of get to know the ins and outs because I'm going to start doing Cinema 4D tutorials, and I want you guys to know the basic get up around and ins and outs of the program. So let's open up Cinema 4D. All right, so when you get into the program, if you've never been here before, it looks kind of daunting. It really isn't, I promise. It's just, it's just got a steep learning curve, but not as bad as Maya or even Blender. Cinema 4D is one of the easier 3D programs to use. So, let's jump into it, and I'll show you just the basics of what we got here. So this is our viewport right here, and as you can see, if you click, it doesn't do anything. So how do you move around in this viewport? Well, you can do it here with these little icons here. This one goes up and down, or side to side. This one scrolls in and out, and this one moves you around like that, but that's not how I do it. I use Alt, or if you're on a Mac, use Option. If you left click, you can move left and right and kind of circle around. If you click on the center one while hitting Alt, you can go up and down, left and right. If you scroll the wheel, you can zoom in and out. And yeah, that's how I like to get around. Also, this button here is to get you into different views. I don't like to use that button either. If you just click the middle mouse button, it gives you to that same window. Now, what are these windows? If you look here, it's top, front, right, and then this is perspective. These are different views, so you can see different angles of what you are working on. You can hit that middle mouse button again to get back into the perspective view. All right, so now that we can move around in here a little bit, let's put something in this scene. I like having this grid here initially. If you don't like where that grid is, you can go out to Filter, go down to Grid, and it'll take that grid away. But now you can't really see where your horizon line is very easily. I mean, it's right here. There is a line for it, but it's a lot easier for me with the grid for now when I start out. So let's put something in here. This little area here, if you click and hold, it brings up what are called primitives, and these are all the different primitives. If you click on one, let's click on what I use the most, a cube. You see it brings in a cube. Voila, amazing. So with your cube over here, you can do a few things with it as we currently sit. Right now, you can move it around using these handles or just grabbing it, which I don't like to do because let's say you want to move it left and right. Well, you might also be moving it in Z depth like that. And that's why I like using these handles only, because this will only let you go in the X axis. This will only go in the Y, and this will only go in the Z, or, you get the idea. So let's say right off the bat, you want to resize your cube. You can do it in a few ways. You can do it over here in this panel window. You can take this size down to 10, which kind of makes it kind of a plane here in the X-axis, and you can do that in all the axes. Or you can hit these little dots right here and squeeze them down like that. Or you can come up here to the size tool and scale everything down uniformly. That's another thing I should tell you. These tools up here, this is the move tool, or I like to use the shortcut E to get there. This over here is a scale tool, or you can use the shortcut T. And then this is the rotation tool, or as you guessed it, the rotation tool is R. And with rotation, you can see it highlights on these bands. That's another way you can just rotate in one axis. And if you hit Shift, it'll go in 10% increments. So as this is just a cube, there's not a lot we can do with it. Let's go up here to Display and go to Gouraud Shading Lines, and I'll show you why here in a minute. If you click on your cube, you have over here where it's called Segments. And segments are where you can break this cube up and just highlight different areas of the cube. So let's click on our cube. Let's bring this up to 4 in the X. And you see these lines here? These are the segments it's creating. If we go 4 in the Y and 4 in the Z, you can see we have all these little chunks here. So how do you select these little chunks? Well, let's say you have your cube set up exactly. You got it kind of the basic shape of how you want it. Then you go up to your cube, make sure your cube's selected. You can either hit this button here or you can hit C, and that will turn the cube into an editable mode. This is your selector tool. You can either have it in live selection, lasso. I usually either use live or rectangle selection. Right now I'm going to have it up in live. So our cube is selected, but it's not doing anything different. Why did we make it editable? Because now we can select different things like polygons, lines, and points, which are over here. Let's say we just want to select one of these squares. We'd go into the polygon here, or the faces, and you see you can click and just grab whatever polygons is selected. And we can move those out, we can move them up, we can scale them, you can do all sorts of things. And by the way, I'm just hitting Control Z to undo all that stuff. Or we can click on the lines themselves, and we can just move a line. I know we're getting some funky shapes here. Or you can click on the vertices themselves and do some weird things like that. Now I hear what you're asking. You're asking, well, what if I want to select a face here and I want just that to be brought out by itself, not connected to everything else? Well, that's when you do something called extrude. This is the only submenu I'm going to get into today because we can really get into the weeds here, but I'm not going to. If you hit the M button and go down to where it says extrude, which is T, now you click and drag and it'll extrude out just that polygon. And you can do that with the polygons. You can do that. Let's go into our rectangle selection and select some points. And one thing I should note, let's say, okay, you want to select these points here. If you do it like this, you've selected those points, but you've also selected all these points over here. So rectangle selection will select everything that's behind that area too. So if you just want those points, it's easier just to click on it, hit shift, and keep clicking, and those are the points you want. And now you have the point selected, and you can do the same thing with that. Okay, so now we're back into our polygon selection. We're going to hit Control A to highlight the whole thing again. And let's say you want to rotate it from down here, but the only way this thing is rotating is in the middle here. Well, you're going to need to re-point your anchor point. So to do that, you hit this little square over here, which is an enable access. Click on that, and you see when you do stuff now, nothing happens because it's only going to affect the axis. So if you want to bring it down, let's go into our front facing, let's go into our front mode here. To do that, you hit your middle mouse button to bring up all your perspectives, and just put your mouse inside the front perspective here and click the middle perspective again. So now we can bring that dot down precisely to the bottom of our cube. And now we can go up to rotate, and we can, we got to turn off our enable access, and now we can rotate it straight from the bottom there. Whee! So I know I'm going through this stuff quickly, but there's so much in Cinema 4D. I don't want this to be an hour-long video, and so I'm just going through it quickly. It'll make more sense once we start getting into projects. I just want to show you a little bit of what this program can do. Another thing to note is this isn't obviously what your render is going to look like. And what do I mean by render? Render is what the computer spits out as a finished product. If you want to see what your render view looks like, at least in this renderer, you have to go up to this button here. And as we don't have anything in here but a cube, it kind of looks like crap. I'll show you how to make it look a little better later. This button here is your render settings. I'm not going to go into all that now, but if you want to fool around with render settings, that's the button to do so. So let's get rid of our cube here, and let's go back into our primitives. You can go with a plane. I hear you asking, well, where are those dots? Well, you have to go back up here to your object button, click on that, and boom, now you got your dots out. You can make this plane as long as you want, but you don't need to do it too long because you can just use what's called a floor, and that's over in this area. You just click and hold that. You have a floor. I know it only looks like It's on the bottom here, but it extends out to everywhere that your viewport can see in the renderer. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So again, these primitives, you can all just do the same things with them. You got a little guy here. Anyways, you know what shapes are. Over here is our spline tools. And so let's just go through what some of those are. A pen tool is what you would see in like After Effects and whatnot. You click a point, you click another point, and you can either drag to hold it or not to keep it straight. And you make a shape doing that. You right click it, disconnect point, and you have your little spline shape. Or if you want to freehand it, you go to Sketch and just click and hold. Voila, you have a spline with different points there already created. Also, it has pre-made splines like circles that you can go down here and make bigger or smaller. Always look in this section when you create something to see how you can modify it. And you have all of these options to do. You have text. This is where you would write text if you wanted to text something out. How you would do that, because if you want to rename things, by the way, double click over here and you can rename them Justin. How about that? Now, when you do that, the text doesn't change, right? Well, you have to change it down here. And voila, Justin. Anyways, with the splines don't have any data to show the render. If we hit render right now, the splines don't show up. So I hear you asking, well, what are splines for? Splines tell a lot of modifiers what to do and what paths to follow. So let's keep my name here. Actually, let's change this to Lunascope. That's a little better, so I don't have to see my name everywhere. So now we got Lunascope. Again, it doesn't have anything to render. But if we go into these object modifiers here and go to the extrude modifier, still nothing happens. But if you put Justin inside the extrude, bam, now we have some geometry. So if you go up here and you click on the extrude here, you can do a lot of cool things. You can make it thicker. See how it's thickening up right here? You can actually make it thicker in a lot of different directions. So now when we look straight over, you see how it's kind of going down. You can also go that way. You can basically modify anything you want in Cinema 4D. So subdivisions, again, are the different crosshairs. See how it makes more squares for you to modify. Right now, I don't need to do any of that, so I'm going to keep it at 1. Okay, you can also modify this by going into the caps menu. These are caps. Let's say you take a cap off, and all of a sudden, on your start cap, you don't have anything except for geometry on the spline itself. If you take them both off, you can literally see through them. Let's say you want to do a fillet. That kind of gives you this kind of look right here. You can up the steps to make it really... Actually, let me show you what I'm talking about here. This is the fillet end right here. So when it starts out, it's on 1. So it only has 1 subdivision. If you up that up, you really start to get kind of a curved, nice edge on it. You can also do fillet caps, which fills it in and still does the fillet, which is very helpful. Now this is kind of looking a lot better than it was before, with those nice edges instead of sharp edges. You can also change the fillet type to linear, concave, all sorts of different things. See how they go in now? You can do a lot of stuff with this. Anyways, that's all I'm going to show on the extrude. Let's redo this here. So let's stop everything here. Let's just make a random sketch spline. So I'm just drawing stuff here, and boom, I'm done. What can I do with that? Well, let's use a lathe modifier. So we take the lathe and we put the spline inside of it. And whoa, what is this? Well, this is odd, isn't it? Basically what it is doing, if we go into the lathe here, go into the object and take the angle down, you can see what it's doing is it took that spline and wrapped it around 360. So this is the spline angle right here, and it made geometry in a 360 degree radius around this point axis here. So when you go to 360, you have full geometry around. So that can be useful to make all sorts of things. Again, you can make the subdivisions higher or lower. You can change the movement so that way it starts at one place and kind of makes like a helix. You can make it bigger or smaller. You can do all sorts of things. You get the idea. These come in handy if you want. I usually do these in the front view here. Let's say you want to do a sketch here, and all you want to do is come up here and come in. Boom. Let's lathe that. Put the spline inside the lathe. And what does that look like? Oh, a little container. That quick and that easy. So the lathe can be a very powerful tool with the spline. What else can we do with splines? Well, we can try what's called a sweep. So a sweep needs two different kinds of splines. It needs a path and a shape that it's going to run over that path. I'll show you what I'm talking about now. So first, let's make a path. We'll again go into the sketch, and we'll just make a backward C here. And we will also let's make a little flower here, but let's make that flower much smaller. Okay, so let's put the flower in the sweep and the spline in, but the spline needs to go underneath the flower. And boom, this is what you get. So it's following the path, and as you can see, it's basically just making this shape all over the path that you gave it, which it can be a very, very powerful tool. And when you go to the sweep, you can even animate it across it. So you can have it start at one spot and boom. Now, I'm basically just going to show you keyframe animation for 1 second because it gets really deep in the weeds. When I just did that and I hit play, nothing happens, obviously, because you have to create keyframes. So let's go to where we want it to start. Hit this little button right here, which is a keyframe. Boom. Move ahead on our timeline. Let's say, I don't know, 30 frames. That's where we want it to stop. Hit the keyframe again. Go to the beginning. And we have a little animation. Boom. That easy, right? It gets a lot more complicated when you have a lot more different keyframes to add in there. You can change rotation and whatnot. You can do a lot with this, but yeah, that's just the basics I'm going to show you on that today. The last I'm going to show you today is the loft object modifier or spline modifier. And let's see what that looks like here. Let's take a circle. Let's put the circle inside the loft. And you see it's just kind of filled it in, right? Well, that's not very fun. Let's hit Control and make a copy of that circle. Let's bring it forward. Oh, and now we have something. Now it is taking this circle and connecting it to that circle. And we can make that circle smaller. We can bring it back. You can do all sorts of things here. You can come in, let's say the next one you want is a a helix, or not a helix, that's a bad example. Let's say the next one you want is let's say the next thing you want is connected to a rectangle. Let's put that rectangle where we want it to be, put it in the loft, boom. And now the rectangle is connected. You can see how this can be very powerful to make different kinds of shapes. You can take this rectangle and you can rotate it to give it kind of a twisty look here. You can do all sorts of things. I really like lofts. Lofts are very, very useful. Okay, I'm going to show you just a couple more of these little modifiers over here. Let's make a cube. We've made a cube. Let's make it smaller. And let's use an array. Let's put the cube inside the array. Make the cube H out of the array. Oh, and now we have a bunch of cubes. If we click on the array, we can change the number of copies. We can change how close and how far away the array is. We can change the amplitude. So in Y space, you can do a lot of stuff with an array. So that way you don't have to make a bunch of different boxes. You just have one. So everything you do to this one box, so let's go to our one box here and let's scale it up, happens to the rest of the boxes. And that's what an array is. Let's pull our box out of the array. Let's see what else we got here. Let's do a symmetry item. So basically what a symmetry item does is, let's grab our cube. Let's look on the front axis here. So let's move it right on that axis and put it inside the symmetry. And now whatever we do on this side of this, I think it's the y-axis, is going to happen on the other axis. Meaning, I know in this instance, it's like, well, why would I want to do that? Well, let's say you have an object like, I don't know, a person. You only have to model half of that person because the other half is going to match that. And it's half the work and you have a full person. So yeah, symmetry objects can be very useful. And again, whatever you do on this side, let's make it editable. Whatever you do on this side will happen on that side. All right, let's delete all this. All right, last little thing I'm going to show you is a bool. Bools are very fun to use. Okay, so let's make a cube. Let's make that cube editable. And then let's make let's use a sphere. Get a little sphere in here. Let's make sure that these are touching, but not touching too much there. So with a bool, you can make these objects interact with each other. So let's put the sphere in and the cube in. And what happened? Oh, where they intersected, there is now a little cutout, which can be useful for making shapes. Let's say instead of this sphere, we have a cylinder. Let's rotate this cylinder 90 degrees. Let's make this cylinder longer. And let's put it right through here. Okay, so right now we have a cylinder through a cube. We put it in the bool, make sure the cube is on top, and we've made a hole straight through the cube very easily. So bools can be very, very fun to use. Now, that's not all a bool can do. You can go right here and you can have these two objects joined, which makes it Let's go into the polygon faces here. Let's make the bool editable. Let's click on the polygon faces here. And let's delete that. So now inside of the cube, you can see that that cylinder doesn't exist inside. It's only on the outside here where these connect, which makes it a lot better for making certain things that you need to make. Also, let's see what else a bool can do. Oop, I made it editable. That's why. Go back to before I made it editable. There's certain things you can't do once you make an object editable, in case you're wondering. If you go A intersect with B, it basically, it looks the same, but let's take the cylinder out of the bool and see what happens. Oh. Hold on. Basically what it does is everywhere that the cube intersected with the cylinder, it took out everything except for the little part in the middle. You can also do A without B, which is basically the same thing. I really don't know what the difference Oh, I see. A without B basically is just a cookie cutter. So it's still a hollow object. A subtract B, it makes polygons on the inside here. Okay, that makes sense. So bools are a lot of fun to use. I keep calling all these things object modifiers. They're not all object modifiers. It's just I don't know what they're all called. But let's check these out. These are actually what object modifiers are. But yeah, so let's see what we got here. Let's make a cube. All right. So let's just make a little kind of pillar thing here. Let's make it taller. All right. So we got our little cube thing. Let's all right. So we have our bend modifier. Let's put our bend modifier a child of our cube. And well, it's not really bending. It's just moving that way. Why is that happening? Well, because it only has one subdivision of this cube. So if you go into our cube, let's turn our bend on so we can see this in real time. This bends all the way around, right? But nothing's happening very much that's interesting for our cube. So, oh, now something's happening. When we're in our Y, if we make more segments, now it has more information to work from. The more segments you give it, the more round it's going to be. But the harder your computer is going to work. So that's kind of the give and take you do when you work with segments is you want the most segments to make it look good with, and let me rephrase that. You want the least amount of segments to make it look perfect. So that way your computer isn't bogged down by all these different polygons. If you take the bend out, let's try a different modifier. Let's try a melting modifier, huh? Let's take that array accidentally. Okay, so the melt is in. And what happened? Well, I'll show you. It's melting. Yep. So again, if you wanted to animate that, you can make a keyframe on 0 at strength. Move it ahead 25 frames. Go to 100, hit your keyframe again, and let's see what we got. Yeah. And that's the melt modifier. So you get an idea of what deformers do. I'll show you just one more. A twist deformer. Make the twist the child of the cube, and let's twist again like we did last summer. Yeah, you get the idea. They're pretty self-explanatory here. You got a jiggle, explosion makes it explode. Yeah, taper makes it taper. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so let's just make a quick little setup here. Let's grab a cube. Let's click into object mode. Let's make the cube a little smaller. Let's get a plane coming up here. Let's go into our front view so we can make sure that we put our cube. Oh, hit the wrong one. Let's click on our cube over here and put the cube on top of our plane. Go back in. Let's make our plane a little bit bigger. I know we could have just added a floor, but I want you to get comfortable with these controls. Let's make our plane a lot bigger in this direction. Okay. Let's bring out a sphere. Oop. Let's make our sphere smaller. Yeah, like that small. Put it to the side here. And put it on top of the floor. Maybe a little higher. And, oh, didn't want to do that. And let's make a cone to balance it all out here. Let's make that cone smaller. Now I'm hitting the buttons just to give you guys a visual representation of what I'm doing. Normally I would just use the shortcuts. Okay, so we have a basic little scene here. Let's actually let's do one more plane. We'll bring it this way. Make it bigger in that direction. And in that direction. Okay, so, and it's always good to name your stuff. So cube is fine. Plane, we can name this floor. And name this, just by double clicking, BG for background. Let's make our background editable. Let's go to polygons. And let's go to our rectangle selection. Let's select, oh, I hit the wrong button. Let's select all of, and let's select all of these polygons. Go back into our live selection, click shift and make sure we get all of the ones we want. All of these, oops, one too much. And if you just click and hold everywhere you touch, as long as you're holding shift, will update. Okay, so we did that. Let's change where our anchor point is. We want our anchor point to be right about there. And let's rotate it. Oops. We are not out of our anchor point, so let's click out of that and rotate. Just make kind of a makeshift little background here. So it would have been nice if we would have kept the angle that we wanted, right? Now, how would we do that and still be able to work? Well, that's where adding a camera comes in handy. So let's do that. These are our cameras here. We're only going to talk about this camera today. Each camera has obviously their own use case, but for today, we're just normally talking about the normal cameras. So let's click into our camera. By hitting this little button here, see how it's dark? If we hit that, we're inside our camera now, so we can pick whatever angle we want our camera. Not going to be too picky here. Okay, let's say we want that there. Now, while we're in here, as long as this is highlighted, every time we move here, it's going to change our camera view, and we don't want that to happen. So let's right-click our camera, go to Cinema 4D tags, and put on what's called a protection tag. This will make it to where now you can't move that camera. If you want to move around, you click out of your camera, and now you can do whatever you want. You can adjust things over here, but when you click back in, it'll bring you right back to where you want to be. So let's take off this protection tag because I just realized that we don't want to be seeing outside of our background. Okay, let's put the protection tag back on. Boom. All right. I'm going to make one more little adjustment just to make it right where I want to be. Let's move our background to where we want it to be. Let's rotate it a little bit. Hit Control A, so we're into the whole thing. Now we can rotate it. And now we can get the angle that we desire. All right, so that's a little bit better. Okay, so this is the camera angle we want. We actually don't even need our floor because we made it into this here little background. And so now we can put that protection tag on. Okay, boom. All right. Who's calling me at a time like this? Don't they know we're protecting things with protection tags? All right. So let's get out of our camera. And actually, let's go into our camera and render it and see what this looks like. All right. It looks like hot garbage. And that's because we have no textures and no lighting. First thing I'm going to show you is textures. So if you double click in here, this is where you create textures. This is our first textured little ball right here. Double click on that. And this is how you create a texture. So right now it's just the default color and reflectance. Let's turn our, actually no, let's keep reflectance and we're in the color right now. So let's change the color. Let's make this one kind of a nice little blue ball here. So this will show you what it's looking like. Right now, it's just basically blue with a little bit of reflectance. You can make things really reflective. It'll, that'll really pop it. Let's see what that looks like in our render. Or actually, first, let me show you how to apply it. So if we want to put this on this ball, you can do it one of two ways. You can either click and put it on the ball that way, or you can click and put it up here. And this little tag right here shows you that the material is on that. This is what it looks like as it sits now. Because it has default lighting, it looks like garbage. So let's make the specular not near. See, this one, you can see it really brings out the specular. Let's not. All right, so we're back into a blend. Let's turn off the specular just a little bit. Specular is this little highlight that comes off of it. All right, so what else do we have? We have diffusion. We have luminance. This means it's going to give off light. We don't want that. We have transparency. We don't want it to be transparent. We have environment and fog. Let's mess with the bump. So let's turn the bump on and let's give it a little texture. You can load in a texture pattern if you want, but we're just going to go with a little noise. Now that is far too much noise, as you'll see. Oh, we unselected it. Far too much noise for what we want this ball to look like. We do not want it to look like that. So let's go into our texture here. Let's bring up the scale. Actually, no, we want to bring down the scale. We just want little itty bitty dots. All right, and we don't want it to be that powerful. So let's bring it down to like 3%. Now, it's got a little texture to it. Still looks like garbage because of the lighting, but you see what I'm going for here. Okay, and we want all of our things to be the same material, just different colors. So I'm going to control click and drag out, which makes a new material. Double click it, go into our color, and let's make this kind of a red. Boom, let's apply that to this little square here. Ooh, I do not like how much. Well, once we get the light, we'll mess with it a little more. Click over. Make it kind of a green. Boom. All right, so now we have a little bit of texture on our shapes here. First thing I'm going to do to make this look a little bit better, let's go into our cube here. Let's make it editable. Let's click on this edge and go to Control A. And we are going to bevel these edges. Click and drag, and boom. Now we have a little bevel. If you notice over here, you have some bevel options. Oop. You can change the bevel. You can add more subdivisions. And now we have nice edges on this cube instead of those hard razor sharp edges, because nothing in life has razor sharp edges like that. So now we have a little bit better looking cube. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is let's get some light in here. And the light I'm going to start out with, if you go to a normal light, this is just a light that puts out light from all directions. It's basically like a light bulb. It goes in every direction. You can put it wherever you want. And it makes things look better, obviously. But this is not the kind of light that I am looking for. Now I want a nice soft light. So let's get rid of this light and let's do an area light. Those are the ones that make it nice, big. The bigger the light source, the softer it will be. So we're going to rotate it, bring it up. Let's get out of our camera so we can see what we're doing here. And you can see the camera represented right here if you want to know where your camera angle is. We are going to rotate, and then rotate it down. So we want it to go straight up. You see how it's kind of on the same axis as the tilted light that we have? We can hit this button and go into our world axis to make it go up straight. Just another tip to tell you. Okay, let's go back into our camera. Let's see how we're going here. Yeah, now we're starting to get somewhere. Okay, let's put a texture on the floor. Color, reflectance. Yeah, this will be fine. Let's change the color just a little bit to kind of a very, very faint light blue. Boom. All right. All right. So now we're getting somewhere. But one thing you'll notice is we have no shadows, right? There should be some shadows here. So let's click on our light. This is our light controls right here. You can change the intensity of our light. You can make it really bright and blown out. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, too much light. And this is the shadow. So there's different shadows you can get. You can have shadow maps, which are soft shadows, which are the ones that I like. Boom, look at that. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere. We also have ray traced, which are hard shadows. And then area shadows, which are kind of the same as our soft light here, which is the one that I prefer for this scene. Let's take this cube and move it a little bit so it's kind of reflective with everything else that we have. Okay, we'll put it right in there. All right. So you're kind of seeing the power of things. I think we need one more light here. Let's show you another kind of light. Let's put a spotlight. Spotlight is exactly what it sounds like. It's a freaking spotlight. Another thing I should tell you here, you see these dots here? The top dot is for the viewport and the bottom dot is for the render port. So let's say you didn't want to see this sphere real quick. So you click it once and you see a green light, you click it twice, a red light, and it's gone. But if you render, it's still there, right? Let's say you want to turn it off in both. Boom. Turn it off in both. Now it's not there anymore. Okay. The reason I say that is because you can also hit this X to turn everything off. And yeah, I wanted to show you this spotlight by turning off our area light. Okay, so now we really do have just a spotlight. Let's go back into our camera, and boom, we have a spotlight. This would be more of a hard light, so we want those hard ray trace shadows. You get the idea. Anyways, I don't want a spotlight, so I'm going to get out of that. Take the protection tag off because I want to adjust just slightly here. Okay, let's see what that looks like. All right, we are getting there. We're getting there. I don't like the bump after all, so let's go back in and let's take the bump strength down to 1. Let's see what that looks like on the blue here. Yeah, that's better. Let's go to this one, bump strength down to 1, and the green, the same thing. Much better. All right, guys, you can kind of see what's going on here. Let's move this red key back just a little bit, like that, so we're not getting so much here. All right, so now when we go into our render settings, there's a couple of things that will make it better. Usually I use what's called global illumination, but since we're not using any HDRIs, I'll tell you more about that stuff later. We don't need to, but one thing that'll help is putting on some ambient occlusion. Let's take a look at that. What that's doing is when light hits an object, that color kind of bleeds out a little more, so it'll bleed the bouncing colors off and make it look more realistic. So yeah, that's basically what I got for you guys today. I know we didn't accomplish much, but I just wanted you guys to get familiar with what Cinema 4D looks like, and yeah, so that way when I do future projects, you're not completely lost. So let's hit the render button. Actually, let me show you one thing. Okay, we're going to go into output. Let's make this, let's lock the ratio, make this 1080. Go into save. We want to save this as a PNG. And we want to save it to LunaScope Film School, episodes 39, and we'll save it right here as test shot. Oh, all right. We don't need to worry about multipass. Anti-aliasing is fine for now. Normally, I like to put it on best, but you know. Options, you can go through all that yourself because you can tell what the different options are. When you go in output here, this is a still frame, but if you're having problems and you're only pushing out one frame when you want to push out more, you want to change this to all frames. But again, we only have the one frame. And I'll show you more about global illumination later. Anyways, you have all the settings where you want. You hit this middle button. And you start rendering. And bam. We have our final render. All right, guys, I hope you learned something today. If you like this channel, go ahead and hit the like button, which is somewhere over here, I guess. Yeah, I'm going to show you a lot more of these VFX. If you want to see an After Effects video that's kind of like this, showing you the basics of After Effects or Premiere Pro, let me know down in the comments below. As long as you remember, it's not a competition. Let's all rise in this business together. I'll see you guys on the next one.